The plane shook violently, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, grim and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are in serious trouble. We might not make it." Panic rippled through the cabin as passengers clutched their seats, eyes wide with fear. Families held on to each other, whispers of prayers and last words filling the tense air. Among them, a young woman sat quietly, her expression calm but alert, scanning the controls and gauges with a precision that seemed out of place in a commercial flight. As the oxygen masks dropped and flight attendants struggled to maintain order, the tension became almost unbearable. Every heart in the cabin raced, every mind bracing for the worst. The captain's words had made one thing terrifyingly clear: survival was no longer guaranteed. And just when despair seemed certain, the woman leaned forward and, in a voice steady enough to cut through the panic, revealed something no one could have imagined her past as a fighter pilot. Heads turned, fear momentarily replaced by curiosity and hope. Could her skills actually change what seemed like a hopeless situation? The cabin held its breath, caught between fear and a glimmer of hope, waiting for her next move. What would happen next? Would she be able to take control before it was too late? The woman's revelation sent a ripple through the cabin. Murmurs of disbelief mixed with cautious hope as passengers tried to make sense of what they had just heard. She didn't say much, only that she had flown combat missions and handled emergencies that would terrify most people. Yet, her calm demeanor was enough to make some hearts stop panicking, if only slightly. As the plane continued to shudder, flashes of her past life began to surface in her mind. She had trained for situations far deadlier than this, spent hours in simulators and real-life missions where split-second decisions meant life or death. But this wasn't a fighter jet, it was a commercial airliner, and every extra second of hesitation could cost hundreds of lives. She scanned the cockpit from her seat, noting the captain's tense movements and the flickering warning lights. Around her, passengers were frozen with fear, some gripping their loved ones, others silently praying. The woman realized that beyond her skills, she would need authority. The captain needed to trust her, and the passengers needed to trust that someone could save them. But would they listen? Would the chaos in the cabin let her take control before it was too late? One wrong move, and the hope she carried could vanish in an instant. The captain's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the yoke, sweat tracing lines down his face. His voice, once steady and commanding, now carried the weight of uncertainty. "I need to run some calculations," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The woman watched him carefully, sensing his pride and fear were in a delicate balance. She knew that if she overstepped, he might shut her out entirely, but if she waited too long, they could all be in real danger. Around the cabin, the panic had taken on new forms. A father tried to distract his crying child, while an elderly woman clutched the armrest, whispering prayers she had long forgotten the words to. Some passengers whispered about crashing. Others exchanged glances that were part fear, part hope, trying to read the woman's calm expression for any hint of what to do next. The woman's mind raced through emergency protocols she hadn't practiced in years. She considered the plane's current altitude, the warning lights she could see from her angle, and the possibility of turbulence worsening the situation. She also remembered the fighter pilot drills, how to take control when communication broke down, how to anticipate the aircraft's limits. Just as she was about to speak, the plane lurched violently, throwing a few passengers against their seats. Gasps filled the cabin. She realized that hesitation wasn't an option anymore. The tension grew unbearable, and every second felt like a countdown to disaster. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time, sending a ripple of screams through the cabin. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins, and the oxygen masks swung wildly, forcing passengers to grab them instinctively. The captain's voice came over the intercom, strained and shaky. "Brace for turbulence. I'm trying to stabilize." His words cut off as the plane jolted once more, lights flickering ominously. The woman's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She moved closer to the cockpit door, her eyes fixed on the instruments she could see through the small window. Each warning light, each alarm, screamed urgency. Her fighter pilot instincts kicked in, analyzing angles, speed, and the aircraft's response to the turbulence. She knew every second counted, and every decision now could tip the balance between life and death. Passengers clutched each other tightly, some sobbing, some silent with terror. A young man shouted questions, desperate for answers no one could provide. The cabin was a mix of chaos and hope, with her presence barely anchoring the fear that threatened to consume everyone. Then the unthinkable happened. The plane lurched sharply to one side, as if defying gravity, sending a wave of panic through the cabin. The captain's voice, strained and breaking, called out for help. All eyes turned toward her, the woman who had revealed her past as a fighter pilot. Time seemed to slow. Could she take control before the moment of disaster arrived? The woman's hands hovered over the cockpit door handle when a loud alarm blared, different from the ones before. The cabin lights flickered violently, and a sharp jolt made everyone lurch forward. The plane's trajectory was suddenly changing in a way no one had anticipated. Her stomach sank. This wasn't just turbulence. Something else was wrong. Through the tiny cockpit window, she caught sight of a warning she hadn't expected, a critical engine failure. Her mind raced, recalling the emergency procedures she had drilled countless times in simulators, but nothing could fully prepare her for the weight of hundreds of lives depending on her now. The captain looked up, eyes wide with disbelief, and muttered, "We've lost an engine," and the others showing irregular readings. Panic spiked through the cabin. Passengers screamed and prayed, some pressing against each other, others gripping the seats with white-knuckled hands. The woman's pulse quickened, but she refused to let fear control her. She realized the stakes had just risen exponentially. Not only was the plane in jeopardy, but even traditional emergency protocols might not be enough to keep them safe. Then a new complication appeared. A passenger near the cockpit began shouting, claiming they knew how to fix the problem. Their voice was frantic, and some passengers looked to them with hope, others with skepticism. The tension now split the cabin between fear, confusion, and a fragile thread of trust. Every second brought new danger, and the woman knew the window to act was closing fast. The plane was teetering on the edge, and the impossible choice loomed. Could she guide them through this chaos before disaster struck? The woman took a deep breath and finally stepped into the cockpit, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I need to take over," she said calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone trained to act when every second counts. The captain hesitated, then nodded, his trust in her quiet but palpable. Passengers craned their necks, watching as she moved with precision, checking gauges, adjusting throttles, and issuing commands that the captain repeated. Stabilizing the faltering plane, the engine sputtered and groaned, but she found a rhythm, coaxing it to maintain enough power for a controlled descent. Sweat ran down her face, yet her focus never wavered. In the cabin, tension shifted from panic to cautious hope as the plane began to level out, the violent jolts easing into a steadier flight path. Families clung together, relief spreading, but no one dared celebrate just yet. The danger wasn't fully gone. Just as the landing gear engaged and the runway lights came into view, a loud thud shook the plane. Everyone froze. The mysterious passenger who had claimed they could help suddenly appeared at the cockpit door, holding a small device. "It's the navigation system. I've hacked it to override the autopilot," they shouted. The woman's eyes widened. She realized their interference could either save them completely or trigger disaster at the last moment. The plane descended, the runway approaching, and every passenger held their breath, knowing that survival still hung on a knife's edge. The woman's mind raced, weighing the stranger's claim against the plane's fragile stability. She made a split-second decision, carefully guiding the aircraft manually while monitoring the device's input. Every passenger gripped their seat, eyes wide, as the plane glided closer to the runway. The engines roared in protest, but her calm, trained hands kept the plane steady. With a final, precise adjustment, the wheels touched down, skidding slightly on the wet tarmac before the plane slowed to a complete stop. Cheers and tears erupted in the cabin, the tension finally breaking as relief washed over everyone. The captain exhaled deeply, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I owe you my life, all of ours," he said quietly. The mysterious passenger, looking sheepish but proud, stepped back, acknowledging the woman's skill as the true hero of the moment. Passengers embraced, shaken but safe, their fear replaced with awe and appreciation for the courage that had saved them. As the woman finally allowed herself to relax, she realized that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges, and calm, expertise, and quick thinking can make the impossible possible. The plane's ordeal had tested fear, trust, and resilience.